of the Research Colloquium series for Fall 13 of the Center. Today we have Michelle Bigenholt, who is a well-known person around this area regarding Latin American studies. She has been in the Valley for how many years have you been?
Since 98.
Since 98. She's a professor at Hampshire College. And so she's a professor in anthropology and in Latin American studies at Hampshire College. And she's an associate professor. And she's going to talk to us about Bolivian Heritage Rush, staking claims in intangible futures. So this is a work that she has been doing with a collaborator, no, at the University in London. I'm going to read a short paragraph about what her expertise is and what she does. So her current research interests include indigeneity, alternatives to intellectual property, transnational cultural work, indigenous heritage, folklorization processes, and the politics of culture. She has received grants from the National Science Foundation, Fulbright Hayes, Fulbright IIE, and the Whiting Foundation, as well as fellowships from University of Cambridge Center of Latin American Studies and University of Connecticut's Humanities Institute. She's currently doing some NSF-funded collaborative project entitled Cultural Property, Creativity, and Indigeneity in Bolivia with Henry Stobbart from the Royal Holloway University of London, Juan Carlos Cordero from Bolivia, and Bernardo Rosso from Bolivia. And she's also a performer. You're a fiddler, no?
Yes.
You play violin. And she's a recorded violinist. So she really knows about, when she talks about music and about a lot of this, she doesn't know about this just because she researches, but because she does it herself. And before we begin, I want to also remind you that we have this event coming this Monday, and this is also a 5-college event. This is from the 5-college Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino Council. We have visitors from Latin America, and this is the visitor for the fall. This is the second part of his visit, and it's this Monday he's talking here. This coming Monday, and the coming Thursday he's talking at Hampshire College. And I also encourage you to come. Publicly, yes.
So we're going to try to do half lights on, half lights off, so we can see a little bit more of the images, and I can read my paper. So we can have the half lights off, I think. Yeah, those are those. Yeah. Thank you. So I'd like to thank, first of all, Gloria and the Center of Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino Studies. A lot of work goes into organizing these events, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share this work with you. This is still a project very much in process, so I look forward to hearing your comments. You'll hear some initial interpretations and perhaps more questions than definitive answers. And also, I want to just mention that this project has received funding from the National Science Foundation, from the Division of Law and Social Sciences. Also, when I talk about we here, I'm not talking about the royal we, but I'm talking about my co-author, Henry Stobbart, at Royal Holloway, University of London. So today we want to talk, well, I'll talk about 45 minutes, and then hopefully we'll still be awake and we can talk. So today we want to talk about Bolivia's Heritage Rush. Since the 1970s, Bolivia has played a very proactive role in emerging global projects of intangible heritage governance, and many Bolivians have embraced enthusiastically UNESCO's 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. Now, Bolivia is a country with an indigenous majority, and it's living under its first indigenous president, Evo Morales. And Evo Morales is a leader who has overseen the writing of a new constitution, and he continues to hold forth, at least rhetorically, on an anti-neoliberal platform. So this is the context in which we observe a kind of fever of heritage registration, or patrimonialización. And this seems to be raging at multiple levels of Bolivian society. As part of this fever, local communities are scrambling to declare themselves as the cradle, la cuna, of different music and dance expressions, somewhat like staking a claim in intangible heritage futures. So in our title, we purposely invoke the mining metaphor. On the one hand, mines conjure the brute exploitation of Bolivia's colonial and republican periods, as well as a kind of free-for-all capitalist grab. Now, I put the image here of Juan Poma de Ayala. Many of you probably know him, 16th century author. His text, he actually lived in what is today Peru, but he's representing here the area of Potosi, Potosi being the place where silver was taken out, and people always say that it bankrolled the Spanish Empire, all right? So one might ask, why is a capitalist culture grab, why a cultural grab is happening in a country that supposedly has taken a position seemingly against the unstoppable advances of neoliberalism? In fact, Bolivian policy within the Ministry of Cultures today remains very much within a neoliberal frame. So here we have the sign of the Ministry of Cultures. We'll notice they've gone from Ministry of Culture, singular, to Ministry of Cultures, plural, representing plurality. We notice the Wifala, the indigenous flag, represented in the Ministry of Cultures logo. All of this sort of signaling something new. But in fact, culture here in this particular ministry is seen as entertainment and potential tourist attraction. Now, someone might also read this kind of culture grab as having other kinds of motivations. Perhaps it conjures up an economic opportunity in the hands of previously exploited populations. Could a heritage rush be more about marginalized populations exerting their cultural rights of control, even as the economic futures promised in such cases might be minimal or even non-existent? So in this talk, we will begin to unpack how Bolivians understand intangible heritage on the ground. To do so, we're drawing from a collaborative project that began in 2012 when we organized a workshop in Bolivia entitled Rethinking Creativity, Recognition, and Indigeneity. Now, we didn't start this project because Henry and I decided, oh, isn't this an interesting topic? We started because we've both been working on music for the last 20 years, Henry even longer, in Bolivia, and recently we've noticed an increased kind of intensity of feelings and questions around the issues of cultural property in Bolivia. And we both can tell stories about Bolivians who've wanted to talk to us about these issues. And this intensity of feeling has come up precisely since President Morales came to power in 2006. So the workshop in Bolivia was attended by representatives from this country's civil society, people who have been involved in creative work, music, dance, theater, and crafts. While the workshop participants brought diverse perspectives to the table, some of them indigenous, a consensus formed around the widespread and problematic understanding of intangible heritage as property or potential commodity. First, we should clarify that the view of heritage as potential commodity has for some time been a major part of Bolivia's position, particularly at government and international levels. In fact, economic motivation, particularly with an eye on potential tourism, fueled some of the first demands for folklore protections in the 1970s. What we see, though, is that local communities are pinning expectations on these heritage futures. We argue that the heightened awareness around state-level performed indigeneity has exacerbated Bolivia's heritage fever. And here's an image of Evo Morales going through the indigenous inauguration when he became president, taking place in Tiwanaku. So there's a lot of sort of state-level performed indigeneity that's a part of this presidency. I'm drawing here on the work of Nikki Fabricant and Andrew Canessa. So as a spin-off of widely publicized UNESCO-aimed projects pushed forward at the level of global heritage governance, multiple localities are now wanting to heritagize their culture, often by staking claims to firstness. Now, to speak of heritage and intangible heritage, we enter a globally circulating discussion, and one in which Bolivians have played a role. So a quick summary here. UNESCO has kept a World Heritage list since its 1972 convention. But they soon looked at the list and they started to realize that most of those World Heritage Sites were in Europe. Meanwhile, in the 1970s, the Bolivian government requested that international protocols be added to the International Copyright Conventions to protect what they referred to as the popular arts and cultural heritage of all nations. Now, eventually UNESCO began to consider an intangible heritage list that would counterbalance the physical sites of the World Heritage List. After all, with these lists, UNESCO was recognizing what it considered culturally valuable in the world. Bolivians have been enthusiastic participants in shaping and then putting forward proposals to UNESCO's Intangible Heritage List. While UNESCO's projects and Bolivians' engagement with them involve certain practices, our talk will focus on re-significations of heritage. So we're not actually talking about how people are supposed to register heritage in Bolivia through government agencies and all of the different links to international spheres, but rather we want to look at how Bolivians outside these agencies are trying to understand and manipulate heritage.